Are you ready?
P.S. Aker.
Let's go.
I think this is the perfect time to introduce the internet to the Michael Saltis.
Michael Lawrence Robert John Saltis. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
That was
That's a name.
that was a name.
And your first name is fantastic.
You said it with authority. Can you say that with authority, but also like raise your cup
Mm.
at the same time? Say that again.
Michael Lawrence Robert John Saltis.
There
Cheers.
Cheers.
Chin chin.
Chin chin.
I like how we're talking about America, and you have that.
Well, January 22nd is a very special day for my people, the British, as it were. This is the anniversary of the Battle of Rorke's Drift.
Oh, in Africa.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, the Zulu.
Yeah, that's right. The Zulu armies of Kitchewa. Thousands of Zulu warriors cornering the British garrison at Rorke's Drift, commanded by a Lieutenant Bromhead, I believe.
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Played by Sir Michael Caine in the movie Zulu. One of his earliest appearances in theaters, I think, and one of his best performances.
I always forget that that's Michael Caine because it's shot in like the 50s or 60s or something like that, and it's
Early color.
Yeah. It's Michael Caine as a young guy. Is Sean Connery in that too, or
No,
who's the other guy?
I can't think of anybody else in it who I would consider notable.
Okay.
I don't think anybody else in that casting lineup had a huge career after that movie. I'm sure they worked, but nobody who we would see in a movie today and think, oh yeah, it's so-and-so.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, well, we got a little better background on what you're interested in, and that's movies. So one of the things we want to do is figure out who is Michael Saltis. Take us through, where are you from? What are your interests? What are your goals? What are your dreams?
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. We might need all night.
Yeah.
We have.
Well, luckily we have 2 parts coming, so.
Well, I guess an enigma, as it were. A son of Bath, Ohio, although I was raised in Portage Lake for the first couple of years of my life. My father was born in a town called Hemel Hempstead outside of East London. His father was a American Czechoslovak ambulance driver during World War II, where he met my grandmother, an East Londoner herself. And eventually, after a couple of years, he brought her and his son back. And my dad grew up in Stowe, Ohio, and eventually rose through the ranks of the medical establishment, became a neurologist, met my mother, gave birth to me, and the rest is history. The rest you'll have to learn through a very clever series of questions. You'll have to decipher me, as it were. I don't give up my secrets easily.
You don't, because I've known you for a little while, and I was talking to Ben. We were talking about this podcast yesterday, and we're trying to figure out where do we want to go with these questions. And I'm like, as we said, the question, I want to know who Michael Saltis is, and so now we have that background.
Did you get any background from anybody else? Did anybody try to sum up who this individual could be? How do you encapsulate?
See, I was going to reach out to people, but then I totally forgot.
Gotcha.
And so you know what? There's probably a blessing because now I get to do all the learning, and we ask the questions. There's no cheating. There's no cards behind anything. It's right now, right here.
Some of us are a little stiff because we're not used to this environment, but we're gonna try. We're gonna try really hard. Speaking of music and speaking of deceptively simple questions, I will tell you one thing about myself that will surprise and disturb you, perhaps. Okay, musical aptitude and how you interact with it. Have you ever taken the music aptitude test?
I have not.
Have you ever heard of this?
I've heard of it. I've never taken it.
Okay, so kind of a psychology test. You go through a series of questions and you answer on a scale of 1 to whatever, I can't remember. In what way do you and how often do you interact with music on this particular basis? So how often do you share songs back and forth with your friends? How often do you search for new artists? How often do you listen to the same song over and over if you like it? Are you more inclined to listen to whole albums or none at all? That sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so they measure it across all these different categories. What kind of a musical listener are you? And then they'll clock you and they'll say you're above average in general and you're particularly high in these areas, and you're below average in these areas, and maybe this one is a low. I took that test and found that across every category, I am way below average. Crushingly low. Which is to say that I rarely send anyone music, although I occasionally do. Like, for example, today for Rourke's Drift, the Welsh battle anthem Men of Harlech is well regarded by my people. So, special occasions, Godzilla's theme, that sort of thing. But
we talked a little bit off camera about it, and we know all that energy kind of went somewhere else, which was to say cinema.
Yeah. You mentioned that you had been to see Godzilla -1. Now, as a non-weeb, as a non-Japanese art fan, so to speak, what was your read?
Oh man, I thought that it was refreshingly good and refreshingly evil at the same time.
Refreshingly evil.
Yes, and what I mean to say by that is, like, I feel every movie that comes out now, there's always like a conflict with the bad guy. The bad guys are never truly bad, right? The good guys are never truly good. And it just comes out to be like this whole mess, like the whole Marvel movies, for example, all the superheroes. There's always a conflict. Like, the bad guy's always right to some extent, right? And you just can't let the good guys be good, and you can't let the bad guys be bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I really liked about the Godzilla movie, was because you just had an evil force, an evil entity that is just like inherently evil. He's just inherently out there to destroy the city of Tokyo. And the people of Tokyo are just inherently good in that they want to save one another's lives, right? And just a beautiful thing. It's all about family, too. And the guy has, he doesn't have a child, right? But he wants to basically protect this little girl that he's kind of like adopted to become like his daughter. And this girl that he kind of slowly falls in love with, but doesn't really know that he's, it's just a fantastic movie. It's just
yes, it's a very life-affirming movie. And I was saying earlier that I've been a Godzilla fan my entire life. I've always loved Godzilla. I started with dinosaurs and King Kong in my very young days, but eventually my mother, when I was about 4 or 5 years old, brought home a little VHS with a title on it called King Kong versus Godzilla. And my life was never the same. It led us all to this moment talking about this movie here. So Godzilla -1 is the first movie in the series to go back to the pre-1950s era in terms of plot. Godzilla was always a movie series that takes 1954, 55 as its starting point in any storyline in the series. That was always the point at which the monster first shows up, first wreaks havoc across Japan, and it was comfortably distant enough from World War II to not go directly into a subject that the Japanese didn't really want to deal with, particularly for a lot of different reasons. And the 1950s have all the trappings of modern life in some form or another. Everything that we have today, you can trace back well before the 1950s, but in the 50s, you can start seeing things like recognizable home appliances, entertainment systems, that kind of thing. So it's familiar enough. Whereas Godzilla -1 takes you back to the tail end of World War II. Your main character is a Japanese kamikaze pilot who is dealing with survivor's guilt after fleeing from a battle without doing his quote-unquote duty, which is to die in battle against the Americans at sea. And into that mix comes this monster, and the movie weaves a story about the moral consequences of every character's action. It's about bravery, it's about embracing family, it's about reconciling with people. It's rare to see a movie today, to your point about Marvel, that has that much moral weight and feels grounded enough while still being about something so fantastic as a giant fire-breathing lizard. It seems like, I think that the only time I saw a movie that as effectively told me an exhilarating adventure story while being sort of crowd-friendly in a way, it kind of reminded me of Top Gun Maverick in that way, which I think more people in the room might have seen than Godzilla -1.
I haven't seen that one either.
Okay, we have to start talking. We have to start going to movies a little bit, and
100%.
We'll review them. So Top Gun Maverick and Godzilla -1 both have kind of I don't know what you would say, kind of a broadly blockbuster type plot. One is a giant monster comes ashore and destroys the city. People have to deal with it. And the other one is heroic pilot has to come back into the Air Force and do something heroic to protect his country and to make up for some past wrongs. both of those movies gave me the same feeling of whatever you did in the past, it's not too late to make good. It's not too late to tell somebody that you still love them. It's not too late to do something that protects your neighbor. It's not too late to push back against an enemy that terrifies you. And it's not too late to make restitution for some ill that you committed in your past. And I'm encouraged that movies like that are coming out still, because the superhero genre in particular just seems like it's been beaten to death. And those few bright spots that I personally was kind of rooting for, those have gone to the wayside thanks to studio politics. We don't have to get into it, but this podcast is now a Prozac Snyder zone. Restore it now, Netflix. You can do it. There's still time. But Marvel has gone the way of the woke, the way of modern politics. They're ever since Disney bought Marvel, they have been morphing it into something very watered down, very corporate, and even where it's not political, not risky enough to be fun.
What do you think is, because entertainment is at the kind of the forefront of society, right? Just movies, TV shows, social media, memes, YouTube videos and stuff like that. Like all that stuff is really at the forefront of like how Western society kind of functions. Why do you think it's so important? Like, is this a battleground? Is it a war zone? Is it a losing battle? Is it just sort of like a thing that exists? Like, what do you make of kind of entertainment nowadays?
Well, we were talking earlier about wrestling, and whether it's wrestling or MCU movies, there is a space to say that entertainment can be just entertainment. Entertainment can exist in a space where it's pretty shallow, where it's only there to sell tickets, it's only there to entertain you. But there's a deeper level that's unavoidable because we're storytelling creatures. One of the turning points in my consciously realizing that I wanted to be more rooted in the faith was actually when I think I was in maybe mid to late high school, early college, something like that, and I was informed enough about the faith, but I was I was drifting enough that I didn't care to talk about it, didn't care to read about it, didn't want to investigate it actively any further, even though I was open to it. And my mother recommended me, hey, you should look at this priest. He's reviewing, movies and stuff. You should check this out. And I kind of glanced at it and I said, well, I'm busy. I'd rather not. And she said, no, just watch this one. He's talking about The Matrix. So I sat down and I watched then Father Robert Barron's review and analysis of The Matrix, parts 1 and 2. And before I knew it, I had watched 10 other videos of his all about movies. And it opened my eyes to the fact that a lot of these movies that we enjoy just on the surface level, so far as we think, can be windows into deeper truths about the world around you. They provide you a perspective about what is the reason that scene where that character made that decision affected you so deeply. Why does Neo standing up after sacrificing his life in a fight with Agent Smith, and when he rises up, why is the fact that he's now more powerful after his sacrifice, why does that resonate with you? Why does that feel universal? So to the extent that movies match the truth, to the extent that movies reflect a deeper reality, they can be real sources of true encouragement. They can help point you in the direction of being a better man, of being a better neighbor, of being stronger in the face of adversity. And you can take that from movies all the way back to the storybooks that you were raised on as a kid. One of the storybooks that left an impact on me was an illustrated book about St. George and the Dragon. Monsters are a theme.
Yeah. It's a beautiful theme.
Yeah, and the monster is very useful. The dragon is very useful. The dragon is everything that you're afraid of. It's powerful. It's alien yet natural. It has otherworldly aspects. It's intelligent. It's not just an animal. It also means to do harm. It wants to collect treasure, which is strange for a reptile to do. It has all these odd attributes, but collectively, every story about dragon slaying is a story about overcoming one kind of adversity or another. And to circle it back to Godzilla -1, Godzilla in that movie is something that represents the existential challenge that the entire nation of Japan was having at that time, where everything felt like every dream that that nation had had in its national life was dead. They had fought a fight that they were never going to win, and they had lost it in a more spectacular manner than any of them would have predicted. And Godzilla comes into that mix as one more huge problem to face after all of this has already happened to the country. So that's hence the title being -1. They're already at 0. Now it's worse than 0. You know, you have nothing left, and now you have a giant monster destroying what little you think you have left. And it's only in facing that head on that you can actually rebuild your life and become the man that you had wanted to be in the first place. You're a coward. You're only going to be more of a coward if you continue running away from the fight. And if you face this unimaginable thing, whatever it is in your life, you can be the man that your neighbor needs to live next to. You can be the man that your family needs to protect them. But if you flee from that, you destroy everything, because the foundation, you know, the center pillar that is supposed to be holding up your house collapses.
My mind is blown. I don't watch movies like that. I realize I need to actually like pay attention. I'm just watching Transformers like, wow, this is cool. Like these robots are fighting. But I'm making those connections, like thinking about like all the now like you're talking about, and it makes sense. And my thought is like, is that you think it's intentional that the director is writing in that way or portraying it in that way, or it's as humans we see God in everything, whether we try to not see it or it's there.
I think that stories take on a certain form regardless of who is telling them in some way. I forget who it is. Somebody pointed out. I believe that it's a Catholic thinker. It might actually be Jordan Peterson. But there's this idea that artists don't always know what they're doing. There's an idea that artists are pulling from something that they don't control or intend all the time, but rather that they channel. And not being an artist, I can't confirm that or deny that. I can think of a few artists that you can have on in the future to confirm that. But I think that if you tell a story and put yourself in the place of a main character in order to tell that story, you're going to have hurdles, you're going to have low points and high points, and ultimately you're either going to be telling a story that is a comedy where you'll be triumphant somehow in the end, or it'll be a tragedy about something, you know, devastating happening and not working out. So maybe there are only a handful of stories, and it has to be one of them. The reason that stories like the ones that Marvel is telling right now are getting so washed out is that they're doing perpetual storytelling. They're doing storytelling that only works in wrestling. Wrestling never ends. The storylines never end in a satisfying way. It is always a hook for whatever the next feud is. Marvel decided that was going to be something that they were going to try, and they only got so far. They were wildly successful for a while. They told some amazing stories that were, very heroic in the true sense. Think about the first Iron Man. Think back to when you watched that movie in theaters. That movie is about a guy who goes through a true moral awakening by engaging with the wild plot devices of that movie. But it was still grounded enough that you could feel that. He still had the proverbial blood on his brow, and he had sweat. He was bruised. He was hurt. He had a heart, and so did all the other main characters. Even the villain had intentions and desires that you understood, even if they were evil. But today, you watch a lot of these movies, and you get the sense that they're just trying to build a bridge to whatever the next big event is, and consequently, you just don't want to continue with it. There's nothing to help you hook on to the next story, and all they're trying to do is hook you, but that's why it doesn't work. It just goes too long.
Yeah, I stopped watching the Marvel movies because I noticed that I'm like, it's the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah, it looks cool, CGI is cool, but there's no actual story. Like I've probably watched like Batman Begins, like that, the Christian Bale series. Just I couldn't even tell you how many times. It's beautiful, and they don't overdo it. it's art. The Joker, love the Joker. It's beautiful. I love it, and it's one of those things that I wanted more, but I'm glad I never got more. Because if you continue it on like a lot of TV shows, you get a good TV show and then season 6, 7, 8 are just garbage because they're trying to drag on something eventually, and she does.
So, that's an interesting thing to bring up, because at this point, it's been long enough since The Dark Knight and Christopher Nolan's trilogy that it's effectively not a new product anymore, not for a while now, which is frightening to think about. Because it still feels like a very fresh story. When you watch The Dark Knight, those movies, all three of them have aged very well, and Batman Begins in particular, because you've kind of forgot about it because of The Dark Knight, The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah.
Those movies are, again, grounded enough and fantastic enough that I don't know exactly what the term would be. They're thrilling in the right measure. They're not so far outside human experience in terms of plot device that you don't recognize the world they're in. It's not full of aliens. He's not fighting Superman, although I will defend Batman versus Superman on this podcast if called to do so.
Only the Snyder Cut.
Yeah. Christopher Nolan made movies that used superhero trappings to convey stories that, again, were edifying in a certain way for the audience. The reason The Dark Knight is as good as it is because the Joker is believably chaotic in a way that really sickens you as you watch it. You can almost kind of smell him when he's on screen. He has this weird. He has such a textured performance. His teeth click. He makes funny noises. His hair looks disgusting. You just know that Heath Ledger stuck himself in a hotel room and surprised everybody on set with exactly what kind of creature he'd created for that performance. And the counterbalance to him is Batman and his nobility, and Michael Caine's performance as Alfred and his nobility. There are so many heroes besides Batman in those movies that make sense, to the audience. But the scene on the boats in The Dark Knight, where the Joker is making a bet and he's saying, if this plan comes to fruition, I'll beat you, Batman, not by beating you to death, but by showing you that the people you're defending are as bad as me. And instead, the people on the boats choose to spare each other's lives, and implicitly they're ready to die for each other. And it is to the extent that we are willing and able and prepared to die for each other that actually holds communities together, I think.
That scene is always I think it's actually so overlooked in today's society, because this is a word that we like to use on our podcast a lot, antithesis. If you've seen the new Joker movie with Antithesis, though the new one with Joaquin Phoenix, which is a good movie by all rights, right? It's a good movie. But those two Jokers, the one that's explicitly just about the Joker, he gets proven right. Right, society is a terrible fluster. Like, everything's bad. He gets treated like crap. There's so many people in this lower echelon of society that get treated horribly. But the reason I don't like that one as much, because in the end he wins. Right, he wins that story as the bad guy. In The Dark Knight, the Joker loses because he overshoots what he thinks people in society are capable of doing. He thinks that one of them is going to betray one another, but in the end, he's proven wrong by this kind of goodwill nature of people that are willing to basically sacrifice themselves for one another, because they all thought they were going to die. I think it's so overlooked in today's society.
Yeah,
that one scene.
It's a morally heartening moment, and I'm gonna offer an encouraging counterpoint to the Joaquin Phoenix Joker analysis, which I think that you can easily. I think a lot of people did watch that movie and come away with exactly what you said. That he is victorious in his race to the bottom of the evil pit that is his life. And as he dives down deeper, that spreads to the people around him. Watching Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal of the Joker is like watching somebody who read a Jordan Peterson book and took all that advice exactly backwards.
Yeah.
It's like 12 rules to ruin your life and everyone else's. And in that way, it's really fascinating to approach, because he does, over the course of the movie, do every wicked and cowardly thing that you can do to cause a descent into madness. In one sense, he's relatable and sympathetic, but because he does have a hard life. He has a mother who's crazy. He's in a city that's going through a crisis. He's got what, for all the world, looks to be like some kind of a mental development issue of some kind. And but at the bottom of it, he is somebody who's making every wrong and bad decision that you can, especially on a moral front. He steals, he lies, he sees his neighbors as kind of a means to an end. If he doesn't want to relate to a woman, for example, that lives down the hall from him as another human being, he sees her as somebody that maybe represents the happiness that he deserves and that he hasn't gotten yet. And he approaches everybody in the movie that way. But even though the whole movie is about the chaos of the Joker, at the spoiler alert if you haven't seen Joaquin Phoenix's Joker.
I'm gonna pop up. Boom, spoiler.
Yeah. Okay, big time. Watch out. At the very end of the movie, when all this chaos is happening, you see after he's taken back into his padded room from wherever he's telling this story to a psychiatrist or someone in Arkham Asylum, you see the film flickers back for a moment to the alley where Bruce Wayne's parents die. And you see Bruce Wayne as a child standing at the end of the alley and the camera pulling back almost as if it's coming towards the Joker. I always took the end of the Joker to be, yes, we've been talking about chaos and evil and wickedness this whole time, but what this moment suggests is that every evil thing has its answer. Everything that is chaotic receives a response. And again, there's something in there that is morally sound. There's this notion that if we really believe in, if we believe not only in God, but in the fundamental psychology of the human being, you can be encouraged that no one ever gets away with anything, no matter how big. Even if you get away with whatever plot, whatever crime you commit, whatever dastardly thing that he commits in that movie, there's no escape, because the moral law is the moral law, and that is symbolized in that universe by Batman. And Bruce Wayne is small, he's helpless, he's been victimized, but he's coming. He's going to get here at some point. You know, there's this feeling of cometh the hour, cometh the man in that moment. So you can, I think, watch the Joker as a confirmation that those things are still true, but it's a movie that decides to strip away the moral consequence, except for the implication vaguely that is going to come eventually.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
And I really love how it shows the closest way that someone could become the Joker. Because when you watch Heath Ledger, it's like this, it's crazy. What he's able to do, what the Joker's doing is just absolutely nuts. And they humanize it, and they think it's like the reverse 12 years Rules of Life and go down. You almost understand, like, maybe that could be real. And I think Joaquin did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know how actors do it.
Yeah, he's terrifying and he's unsettling. You think that you could probably take him in a fight if you came toe to toe with him in an alley in some city, but at the same time, he becomes powerful by embracing the darkness fully, which is what Batman does halfway, I think, or you could phrase it that way. The Joker embodies how dangerous you can become if you decide not only to push back against the monsters in your life, but to become the monster yourself. Batman is someone who puts on the armor of a monster and therefore is able to be a better man in the presence of evil. He's somebody that can be gentle because he is strong, but he doesn't become wicked himself. All the Batman fans who happen to come across this podcast will now refer to the various comics where he goes too far, and the entire whole of the story is about him circling the drain of his own dark decisions. Yes. So leaving that aside, sticking with Christopher Nolan.
Have you ever heard of a series called The Witcher?
Yeah.
So it's a video game series, and it kind of employs that idea. Like there's two different ideas you can have, right? Like you can either have someone that just entirely knows how to employ something that is good. An example being for Beowulf, for example. He's sort of this like supremely good hero who only knows how to destroy evil. And then in The Witcher, you have this idea where like you create the bigger monster to take care of the ones that are already there. And that's kind of what you have with the Joker, because like as bad as the Joker is, this is what I was kind of talking with like conflicted people. He's bad, but he's also bad to bad. You know what I mean? Like he's not entirely evil to the sense that he's only going to be, he's just there to destroy evil. The thing that I did kind of like about the Joker is you kind of said, like, it shows you this, it gives you this suspension of like reality that like anyone could kind of delve into this, someone could fall into this sort of like trap, and you just become dead to the world. You just become like your own entity, kind of like what's the name of that? I'm trying to think of is it Loki? I think he's like the spirit of mischief, right? Like he's not bad or something like that. He's just not good. You know, it's kind of like this weird in between where he's just an agent of chaos. Sort of an in between, I guess.
Yeah, the scene at the end of Joker, where towards the end when he's the riots have all happened, he's fully embraced this dark side of himself. He's got all of the confidence that he lacked in the beginning of the movie. He's had a real villain's hero's journey, and he's achieved his final form. He is now the Joker that you in some form recognize from the comics or from the shows, all of that. And he's standing in the middle of riot burned out Gotham. There's a crowd of people around him cheering. There's cop cars on fire. There's windows smashed, and he's just got his arms up in the air. And the phrase that jumped into my head in that moment was Rat King. Like he's become the Rat King. And there's something, again, deeply spiritual about that, because there's an echo of that whole idea that he's somebody who could have served in heaven, but he decided to reign in hell. He's somebody who embraced the demonic temptation. And the thing about that is you can get real power by giving into that temptation. He has real power at the end of that movie. He has followers. He has people who will destroy and implicitly kill for him. People are running around on the streets wearing masks to symbolize their unity with him. He's a king. But he's a king in hell. He's somebody who has everything that he wanted at the beginning, and what he wanted wasn't good. He didn't want to sacrifice. He didn't want to give to others. He wanted somebody to finally give him what he wanted, which was to be on top of something. But you can only have that kind of power without sacrifice if what you're giving up is your commitment to the moral law. He's got no humility. He's got only pride. He will say anything and do anything to get what he wants. He's effectively in hell, even though he has power, and he's destroyed the lives of everybody around him in doing so.
He's sort of like the anti-Job to a certain extent, right? Like very, very like the reverse story of Job, whereas like where Job never gives in to sort of the suffering, the Joker does, and the devil rewards him for it, right? Whereas Job gets sort of a much different reward by continually allowing the suffering to kind of like, engulf him to a certain extent.
Yeah.
That makes any sense.
Yeah, and the movie knows what it's doing there. Do you know about the story behind the director who made Joker and why he did so? He's the guy he used to make comedies. I think somebody can correct me, but I believe that he directed the Hangover movies.
Oh.
And he was a guy who wanted to tell stories that were risky, offensive, funny movies. And it got to a point where he couldn't tell those stories anymore, because every time he pitched an idea, they said, that's not funny. This is actually too offensive. We don't want to make jokes like this anymore. And what's really fascinating is that you can see his frustration about that come out in scenes in Joker, where he's sitting on the couch with Murray, Robert De Niro's character, and Robert De Niro's character is sitting there, and kind of out of it feels like a weird space if you're only watching the movie as a movie for a moment, where the guy is saying, hey, that joke you just told, that's not funny. And it feels suddenly very isolated and very focused. And that's because this is the moment where the director is taking his chance to vent about not being able to make funny movies in Hollywood. And there's something to be said about being polite and not offending people and everything. But there was also a period where the country seemed to be laughing together a lot more. And maybe it wasn't over all the right things and everything, but you had comedians who were rolling out movie after movie that were hilarious. And if you haven't noticed, those really aren't out there as much. They try once in a while. They put out, but it's all become kind of toilet humor. And maybe some of the humor was rude before, if not a lot of it. But it was also hilarious. It was jokes about the whole person, jokes that took risks and didn't mind whose toe you stepped on. And in some sense, by agreeing to all be the target of that humor, we were kind of at peace with each other. And now we're on eggshells around each other. And that anger that comes from not being able to say the thing that you know is funny, that comes out in Joker a little bit.
Yeah. It makes sense.
My mind is being blown. I'm just thinking of something.
Where else can we go?
Yeah. Thank you. I still like how you view things and how I need to start viewing things. There's so much more meaning in everything. And we as people, like especially like we talked about with Colby with music, how the devil uses music, how we're being tainted through music and through what we're watching and we don't realize it. And as someone who just consumes content, I know a lot of people definitely need to just take a step back, actually look what's actually going on. How is this connecting with you? And is it good? Is it bad? Is it feeding into a negative temptation or is it making you better?
Well, as somebody who consumes all that content regularly and as somebody who actually, God bless you, enjoys music for the most part, how feasible is it? How practical is it for you to actually reckon with content that way? What kind of barriers help you in measuring your familiarity as you dive into these things?
You almost have to just take a hard stop. So Exodus 90 was something that is super helpful, very difficult, but you only can listen to music that glorifies God. And in doing that, being with, as I guess, showering with clean water, you didn't realize the water was dirty before. And I'm listening to these Christian artists, and yeah, it could be cheesy. Like, the devil better watch out. I got Jesus on my side. Bible blicky on my side. It's hilarious. But it's actually a line. I promise you. I'll play it after this. It's fantastic. Shout out Big Breeze, dude. I love your new album. It's awesome. I saw him in concert too. But I digress. And when you consume actual good content from trusted sources, then that's when you realize something's wrong with the other content. Like when you watched, so I have a lot of younger siblings. When I watch I showed Trinity the Bert Kreischer machine story. When I consumed it, I just remember the story, it being just hilarious. I didn't realize how many curse words, innuendos, and everything were in that story.
Yeah.
And I had to turn it off. I felt really bad. I didn't, like, those things you just, after we've consumed it so many times, it just becomes numb to us. And as Catholics, as people trying to be better, that's when you take that step back, to consume good content, then go back to your other content that you were watching before. Be honest with yourself, you probably won't watch it again.
This is a long way of getting around to saying you really should watch Godzilla -1. Very, very, very clean, wholesome entertainment for the whole family.
Oh, yeah. Just a little dark.
A little dark at times.
Yeah. But
yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Teens and up. My favorite song to listen to or to play in the background, rather, since, gotta be honest, was I listening? I'm not sure. During Exodus 90, when I did it in 2019, was Rachmaninoff's All Night Vigil. If you find that there's an album of that entire, I guess, liturgical sequence. I'm not sure what to call that. I guess that liturgy is what it would really be, right?
Yeah. I mean, the music that he made for the liturgy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess liturgical music.
Yeah. Play All Night Vigil sometime.
His series. Sometimes they call it a series. Yeah.
Like music's really hard for me because I didn't realize I don't listen to like the lyrics most of the time. It's about the sound and how producers are able to just make things it just sounds just cool. You listen to something in a car versus your headphones or your phone speakers. And that's where I kind of went to like Christian rap because I'm like, okay, I listen to rap. That it's kind of harder to ignore the curse words and the tones in the songs, but you try to, as humans do. We try to rationalize and make everything that we do that we know is bad. But he said like he's trying to fight for the people he loves,
in a certain way,
in his own special way, and that's where that's where like the Big Breeze, Colby, all those guys. It's definitely helped me. And I'm. Do you know Mary Sarah Minkhouse?
No, I don't.
So the Minkhouses are a big family in the Cleveland diocese. One is a priest, one's in the seminary. And Mary Sarah Minkhouse, she is a singer for Damascus Worship. They're on Spotify. She is an amazing voice. She actually sang at our wedding, and she actually has a little concert here Wednesday, which will be like a week and a half after the podcast comes out. I'm super excited to go there. But she's so gifted with her voice and the songs she's able to sing that praise God, that bring out so much emotion in me that I never thought music really could. Because like I said, I just use it, just the sounds, and it's kind of an escape, just to tone out everything, especially in the gym. And during Exodus, when you take out all the noise, all your coping mechanisms that you didn't realize you had, you were confronted with all your issues, your struggles with temptation, lust, anger, whatever it may be, and you're really, really vulnerable. And those songs like bring me to tears. Podcasts that are talking about conversion stories hit differently when you shut up all the noise. And any man, I recommend Exodus 90. I want to talk about it at some point. Like, we've all done it.
Yeah.
So we'll see if we can get there at some point today. And shut off the noise. Confront your demons. That's what I'm in the middle of right now. It's not. That's where it's going.
So is the absence of audio visual stimulation the hardest part of Exodus 90 for you?
Yeah, especially I post content. Like we're on a podcast. We're have to try to keep up with some trends and know what's going on. And then when you look at it for a second, it's very easy to get sucked in. If you our guest we had a couple podcasts ago, Simon talks about, he's an artist. We didn't dive too deep into that on the podcast, but he talks about how everything we see is a form of manipulation. Whether it's good or bad, we have to figure that out.
Yeah.
And consuming content, a lot of it is negative. Even if it's not horrible, it's distracting you from what you should be doing. Reading, tending to your wife, praying, whatever it may be. That's what I'm struggling with, is not getting sucked in and just kind of forgetting what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I guess to bring this back to my own experience, I went overseas in between 2018 and 2019 to live in Prague and teach English for a year. And while I was over there, I met some good people, and many of them have stayed in my life and are very, very close friends. I didn't have, at that time at least, a lot of good peer support as far as the faith went. And I definitely wanted to re-up my commitment in that environment, because the Czech Republic is a beautiful, beautiful place. Prague especially is like a fairy tale city. I mean, it competes with cities like Rome for just raw beauty. It has a godly power over you. If you're on any of the social media platforms that have a lot of these new classical architecture motifs, Culture Critic is one on Twitter. I will not say X. Culture Critic has, I don't know how many followers, but it's just all about classical architecture and art and sculpture and music and that sort of thing. And Prague comes up on it a disproportionately high number of times in comparison to a lot of the other cities that you would think of. So it has all that going for it. It has all of the edifying power of beauty going for it. But it's a very atheistic country and a very atheistic city. And so doing Exodus 90 was sort of a godsend, quote unquote, at that time for me. And I had to do that remotely with people. So I had a whole bunch of American friends in Northeast Ohio and one friend in Munich that I knew, who we would have video calls with for our meetings and our check-ins. And it was extra difficult to be vulnerable to them because you're like, I can easily get away with something here. I can definitely avoid telling the truth. And having that, deciding to commit to that level of vulnerability and honesty does not come naturally to me. And Exodus 90, I recommend that everybody try it. I definitely don't recommend that everybody do it every year unless you're really sure that you are the type to embrace that kind of that kind of rigorous sacrifice and that kind of openness to your friends, because that's a lot to handle. That's a lot to give to people. That's a lot to take in from others. So if you're not ready to help somebody else through what he's struggling with, through thick and thin, Exodus 90 is a tough one. But I definitely back you up on it. Every man should try it at least once, for sure.
I'd like to talk more about it. Are we still gonna do sort of like a second part, you think, or
How we doing? I'm gonna move my chair.
we're about 55 minutes in now?
Is it a jacket off type of time?
Perhaps.
But Simon, who's coming into the church, he puts his rosary in his pocket. He's wearing his rosary, and I realize I don't carry a rosary. I'll just in my pocket normally. I'm like, okay. Not that I'm trying to be better or he's whatever, but
Over here?
Yes.
Towards Ben.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. It's like he's coming into the church, and I need to be an example. I need to be a good Catholic. And I'm like, why don't I have a rosary? So it's been nice to just kind of remind me, like, okay, and
Swap you for a sec.
gunmetal.
Indeed.
Is it from what's that website?
Rugged rosaries.
Yes.
Yeah, this one is the replica of the World War I rosary, the one that was
Can we show the camera a little?
what's the word?
It'll show, but that will not zoom in.
No.
Yeah, it's a replica of the rosaries that were given to American soldiers, American Catholic soldiers during World War I, by the government. Imagine that.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
Government gave people rosaries. It's crazy.
Yes, indeed.
Wouldn't happen now.
Taxpayer dollars paid for rosaries? Are you kidding me? What a scandal.
No, this is lovely. I like the Saint Benedict medal motif for a rosary very much.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you remember the conversation we had, was it the handful of weeks ago, the 13th?
It was at it was at Jack's. I forget the date, but talked a little bit about spiritual warfare.
Yeah, and so Benedict, obviously that medal is very powerful, and Mary obviously is super powerful. So I'm like, I know what, when I feel anything, I just grab the rosary, and it's very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But we dove into spiritual warfare. I don't know if we'll do it today, but we there's a lot of that's what the thing is. Realizing having a podcast, talk to people who I want to say some people. I don't want to offend anybody that's not been on the podcast. Just talking to people that are good Catholics. There's so many good things we can talk about. There's so many routes we can go and have those amazing conversations, and it's just never ending. It's beautiful. Yes, beautiful.
Yes.
Well, you brought up Chesterton. You're reading through Orthodoxy right now.
I won't even say reading. I'm listening to. I am horribly read. I am horribly watching movies. I played baseball. Okay, I was that guy who just played baseball
And a catcher, by the way.
And a catcher. I did play at a very high level. I did. I am very proud of the level I was able to play at. A lot of guys I played with are now. They went to almost all of them went D1. A couple who are playing in the pros right now. I think I caught my first 90 or 85 mile an hour pitcher when I was like a freshman in high school. It was stupid. I was so scared. I was so scared. Everyone I was.
What is this power?
Yeah. And I have really small hands, so I had to wear an extender on my thumb because if I didn't, it would just jam, and it hurt so bad. But I think when I was a junior and senior, everyone I was up against was throwing in the 90s. It was horrible. It was so hard. It helped a lot, but now I'm not. I didn't read all like the Chestertons and dive deep into philosophy, and reading was just boring to me, and I'm also that person that quick dopamine and books are hard for me. So listening to them is a lot easier. Or listening to podcasts. So I'm trying.
So you're how far in Exodus 90 then? And has that changed your ability to read during that time? Have you noticed anything there? Because I bring that up because Exodus 90 had a strong enough effect on me when I was going through it that I found that I could focus again on reading in a way that I hadn't been able to in a long time. So I don't know if you've noticed any change.
I've noticed a change in the content I'm consuming. Mm-hmm. So instead of watching Seinfeld or whatever it may be, I listen to Catholic podcasts. I'm listening to audiobooks. So yes, in a way, but I'm also very busy with my time. I'm always, like I was up till 1 o'clock editing last night. I'm always doing something. And I'm also helping with an Exodus group. So on Wednesdays, then adoration on Tuesdays, and Thursdays is a podcast, Mondays podcast. So I wish I had more time to sit and read. I have a lot of books, so many books. You came over, and I showed you the books. You're like, wow, Michael. Mike knows. Yeah, wow.
Look at this guy.
Yeah, is that meditations too? Wow.
It's even the nice Barnes and Noble binding.
Oh yeah. I have it all, but unfortunately, I've not found that time. I was talking to my anchor today, who's Ryan Arto, and it's interesting. He's a seminarian. He just took his vows to become a deacon, and so we're two vastly different lives. So I just got married in May, living out that vocation, and he is on the route to become a priest here in the next year and a half. And it's beautiful, very different. And so bouncing ideas and talking about our struggles is a little bit different. I also don't know the guy. And usually with Exodus, like it's kind of do with some of your buddies. So you already have that
intimacy.
Yes. And so getting that with someone you don't know, it's difficult, but super, super rewarding. And so today, I was able to talk for a little bit longer. So like that we're just a lot of like platitudes. Like, oh, how you doing? Whatever. And so now we're diving into it a little bit. How do you deal with temptation? That's where that thought, or it was. So what I talked about with when you tear down everything and you were confronted with all your temptations, that's something from him. And I was like, wow, like that really hit, because I realized my fuse has been so much more short this round in Exodus than it ever has been, and I didn't really I was like, why? Like I'm not necessarily. I'm just. One of the days I was fasting. I'm also horrible fasting. When I was fasting, I got a call from a telemarketer. I get called like 6 times a day. It's obnoxious. I was just like, you know what? The fourth one today, I answered. And I'm trying to like see if I can get off the call list. And it's the automated like people. So how a normal company does it, you can say yes, no, and it takes you to where you need to be. This was just a funnel straight to the person. Anything you said, it wasn't listening to you. It was going straight there. And after about 2 minutes of that, I stayed 2 minutes yelling at the machine. When I got to the human, I lost it. Absolutely lost it. I felt so bad because I just cursed out a Indian lady. my wife yelled at me.
She's heard it before.
Yeah, probably. I felt so bad.
And worse.
Yes.
I probably, and the thing is too, is like out of that anger, nothing came from it. I'm still on the calls. I'm still getting 6 calls a day. But now I'm trying to just get peace from it and learn.
To breathe a little bit.
Yes. Try to just be a better person.
Leads. You're a lead.
Yeah. It's the stories that come from it are hilarious. So from the I'm a chaperone of a high school group. There's like 15 of them. 15 high school kids just killing it in Exodus 90. Where I wish I would have been in high school, on that faith journey. Yeah. These kids are just fantastic. Yes, there's some funny things talking about like the cold showers, and anybody doing Exodus 90, cold showers are horrible. Shadow boxing. I promise you, fight the shower, punch it, it works. It's weird, but it works.
Should have thought of that.
I'm telling you, just if one day, just try it. Don't pivot, just fight. There's some stories people almost fell.
Don't pivot, just fight is your next T-shirt, I think.
Don't pivot, just fight.
That's actually sick.
Come on.
We could dive into it just because, like, stand up against evil. Just fight.
Don't pivot.
Don't pivot.
Just fight.
Dude,
I think one of the really, really important things about Exodus 90 is kind of the idea of silence, right? Like, silence is unbelievably and unimaginably important, because one of the things you kind of notice, first off, when you're doing Exodus 90, is that you're just always going to have desire. You always have desire. It's sort of like the prime condition of being a human. You just always have desire, and that desire sometimes gets pointed in all different types of places, especially when you're constantly filling your life up with social media, food, different types of hobbies and stuff like that. Like, your desire is constantly being pointed in like different directions. You never really get a true sense of direction unless you experience true silence, right? Like, people who are in grief, for example, are typically very silent people, but their grief is very directed, and they become very focused people inside grief, right? Because they're just focused on like that grief. When you're silent, like we always say, God comes to you in silence. He speaks to you in silence. So you have to give him that time of day. It's why adoration and benediction is so important, because you're silent at those functions, right? God comes directly to you in that silence. I don't I think it's Pascal who has the quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but I think he said 99% of the world's problems would be solved if 50% of people could sit in a room for an hour in silence. Because most people don't have that skill.
I don't have that skill.
No one can just sit in a room and just be silent and try to not really think about anything.
Yeah.
Right.
That's like where, like, editing late at night, that's where I struggle. Because when you're tired, you're only can eat the 3 meals a day, so you can't snack.
Mm-hmm.
You're broken. Like you're confronted by all your temptations, like I mentioned before. And that's where I'm exporting the podcast, and it takes like 20 minutes, and I'm just like staring at the screen. And I made the mistake of exporting in 4K one day. We don't record in 4K. So it was completely unnecessary. And it took an hour. And that's just where you're strong for 5 minutes, and then, and then you realize where you're.
Oh, my muscle memory. Whoops.
Yeah, it's horrible, and that's where I wish that I could just throw my phone away and just not be on social media. Hopefully, at one point, I'm excited to when hopefully this gets bigger, we're able to just come here, record, and then have somebody else handle the production of it and the posting of it. So I could do Exodus again and actually have time to read, have time for myself, for formation, and to just better connect with my wife. And that's we haven't talked about marriage too. Marriage is a beautiful thing. What you're about to experience is in the next month.
Yeah.
You're about to have a kid.
Yeah.
Life's changing.
And that kid will not be silent.
No, that kid will be a baby.
No, indeed.
And I don't think I've told you this,
but yeah,
in July, I will be going through the same thing. God,
Congratulations.
prayers, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And all these thoughts going forward is, all right, life's going to change. I need to be at a certain level of man so that I can continue to be productive in this kind of sense, provide for my family, and then be a father for my child. And that's like really like the motivation for Exodus, for becoming a better man, better human. And it's really tangible. And it's a little bit scary because I know that I'm not there yet. And I know through the grace of God, I will be there if I continue to do it honestly and try. And it's a lot.
Well, you should both make sure you take some notes over the course of the process. Maybe even create some cultivated, pure content for the edification of other men who will one day be going through the same thing, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's what we want to talk. We want to talk about like sexual sin for men a lot, because that's something that we all go through, but it's hard to talk about.
Yes.
The one person that does it really well is what's his name? Pius of Aquinas, Matt Fradd.
Matt Fradd, yeah.
Because with the strive
early on, that was how he broke onto the scene, really, as a Catholic speaker, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
With the Strive
21. Yeah.
And there's uncomfortable, hard conversations that need to be had. We're trying to build that platform where we can have those kind of conversations. Even the conversations we've already had at the beginning part of this podcast, diving deeper into thought, looking at movies as not just content, but what are we consuming? What are you getting out of it? How is it making you better? And like how you talked about Godzilla is just fascinating. I cannot wait to watch it, not only for just it being an awesome movie, but that story about the Japanese people, like what they're going through, that there is hope at the end of it. And I'm also doing like Bible in a year. And I'm good Catholic. I never read the Bible. And so going through that, hearing these stories that I already know most of them because I watched VeggieTales. I didn't read the Bible, but I watched VeggieTales.
Well, that's the most accurate rendition of the story.
It really is. You get absolutely everything from that.
The guards of the city were in fact French. So
yeah.
The French and they're
yeah,
green.
And they're green.
Green peas.
And being able to spend time and reflect on them, and that's where I also kind of just fell into a friend group who was all converts, like very Protestant. So they're very well read in Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing them talk about Scripture and then getting that Catholic light into it, it's humbling and driving me deeper into trying to, like, that's why I started to try to listen to Chesterton. I'm like, okay, we have Michael Saltis coming on. I know he's big with the Chesterton Academy and Chesterton. You studied philosophy in France, and then we're hopefully having Rocco on here sometime soon, and he's the headmaster of the Chesterton Academy. I probably should know a little bit about Chesterton.
Indeed. And well, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, my knowledge of Chesterton before I got involved with the Academy was very indirect. And even today, I find Chesterton as one of the Catholic thinkers who you have to read more than once, at least if you're me, to get everything out of him that you can. Whether it's orthodoxy or his stories, the content, if it,
Jeez, modern.
I guess it is, the late 19th, early 20th century content that he produced. His books of essays that he published in newspapers and journals and things like that, those are the things of his that I can consume readily because he was writing for an audience that was prepared to read on that level. So I can talk about film and art and go to a certain depth. The challenge with Chesterton is something beyond what you get when you read C.S. Lewis, for example. Lewis writes at a level that I would recommend to anybody who wants to start to take a fresh look at Christianity, generally speaking. He's very approachable, very warm, intelligent, but crystallizes intelligent thoughts in a way that the average person can not just comprehend as if it's the lowest common denominator, but he puts it in a way that is humble in some sense.
Okay.
And I'm not saying Chesterton isn't, but Chesterton is very colorful. Chesterton is very whimsical with the kinds of language that he will employ in a given work, and his philosophy is very hard for me to penetrate.
Yeah, he's a little bit more poetic.
He is. Well, he was an art student before he was anything, and he discovered that he could write and that he could do much of the good that he was planning to do anyway. So he was somebody who was a creative. He was a thinker. Some of the most pleasant passages of Chesterton's work are, again, whimsical in nature. You always had the feeling that he was sort of riding on a cloud. So that impenetrable philosophical language doesn't feel harsh or burdensome, but it is hard. I have difficulty reading him on first go. So I recommend if you find a book of his articles or short stories, I would give that a look at some point if you find that orthodoxy is maybe not yielding up its secrets to you as readily as you wanted to. Don't give up on it. Keep going.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, it was nice. I actually found it's on YouTube. It's a guy reading it to me. Like you can watch him read it. It's like a live stream. But he also breaks down a little bit, and he'll reread things because he's doing it for the same reason. He had to read it multiple times because there's so many levels to it. There's so much there, and you mentioned content. And when I first started, like I think I'm on like chapter 2 or something in that book, in that little YouTube series, and my overwhelming thought is like, can you imagine Chesterton on Twitter? His responses, because if correct me if I'm wrong, orthodoxy's response to another book or something, a series of essays like was it Heresy that he posted for somebody else, and this is a kind of his response back. He goes, okay, I broke down your philosophy, but
now I'll build mine up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, okay, well then, boom, comment, here's my stuff, and it's like wow, and it's like you said, the poeticness that he does have. And I have a very simple mind. I think, I don't know, I never thought I was creative. I'm actually kind of impressed I'm able to like make shorts and stuff. But train of thought's coming back. It'll come. It's coming.
Well, I mean, it is more natural to you than you think, regardless of whether you are a content creator by your temperament or by your obligation in your line of work. Chesterton would point out that from the beginning, if you examine archaeology, if you go back into the history of man is first and foremost a storyteller. So the fact that you are engaging with things like content creation and storytelling in some sense, in some creative way, that is intrinsic to your nature. Some people are completely all in on storytelling. Some people have a vocation to storytelling and to art creation that surpasses anything that we can possibly imagine. But be encouraged by that. Just remember that we're all storytellers. This is really how we communicate with each other in some sense.
Yeah. No, because diving deeper into philosophy, it's always been hard for me to like grasp. I realize I don't like think in color. I don't dream in color. I actually I don't. My dreams don't make sense. They're usually like shapes. It's like it's really really weird. I talked to a priest about this because he was talking about like meditative prayer, and I'm like told like I can't. Like he goes, all right, look, think of the crucifix. Like imagine the crucifix. I can't. It's just I can't do it. It's really weird. And philosophy is a lot of like that additional thought on top of just what they're saying, and that's where I'm struggling to kind of piece it apart and see what I can get. That's why I love talking to people who have that background, who already read it and digested it. To hear it already digested is really easier to eat, like a baby food. You know, it's just baby food philosophy. That's what I need. That's why podcasts are fantastic to listen to for me, from like Practical Kindness, because they're breaking down a hard subject into something that I can easily comprehend.
There's a fantastic essay. You don't have to read it, but it's called "The Anointed Imagination," which was written by a Trappist monk named Erasmus Levomarikakis. He was, I think he's like Slovenian or something like that. It's funny. So he used to be a Trappist monk, and then he became a priest. When he became a priest, he changed his name to Father Simon, which I just thought was the funniest. It was like Erasmus Levomarikakis to Simon. Yeah, which is funny. But he kind of talks about like it is a necessary good to create things, because it's a necessary imitation of God, the creator, right? Like you were just saying, like there's like an intrinsic thing that we have inside all of us in the kind of the Chestertonian sense. There's an intrinsic thing inside of us that all points back to our creator somehow. And how you were saying, like, you know, you might not be able to meditate by yourself, so you require an image to be given to you, right? Which is what the crucifix is. Like, it's God giving you an image, which is why good movies, good books, good pieces of art are so necessary and so important, because they are people that are using their imagination for a necessary good in order to give you an image that points you to something higher so that you can strive for it, right? And we were using that word before, strive. It's so important. You have to strive for the images in life that you feel called to, right?
There's a story about Fulton Sheen when he was I don't know if it was his PhD philosophy thesis or something similar. Somebody can look it up and figure out exactly what it was. But he was writing a thesis of some kind regarding philosophy, and he wanted to get whatever the proper term is for a quote on the back flap of your book. He was going to different people asking for them to give it a foreword, give it a read, and one of the people that he went to receive a foreword was Chesterton, and he told Chesterton, "You've given so much to the writing of philosophy, to the thought that a lot of us are subjecting ourselves to in the pursuit of higher excellence. I'd love to have your opinion on what I've written here." And Chesterton's response was, "But I don't know anything about philosophy." You know, like there's something so there's something almost angelic and light about the way Chesterton thinks and writes. And it's something that, again, I was drawn to very indirectly. For the first time I heard about Chesterton and recognized the name was in the work of another author, an author of fiction. I'm sure somebody in our peer group besides me has read Dean Koontz books somewhere along the line. So Koontz is a guy who writes an enormous amount of fiction, and has since, I think, the 80s sometime, and he's always been right next to Stephen King on the shelf for how many books he's writing and how often he's writing. But they're very different kinds of authors, and Koontz is one of the only modern authors who feels a little bit like Chesterton when he writes. There's very kind of thrilling, dark subject matter. There's action. There's, you know, murder, whatever you want to out of a novel, whether it be a beach read or something more literary. But undergirding it is a very clear sense of why wicked people are wicked, why good people are good, and how they think differently. He always, his best books go back and forth between a villain's perspective and a hero's perspective. And the groundedness with which he engages in wickedness on its own terms and goodness on its own terms always struck me, because I didn't understand how he could clearly understand both. And I think part of it is that when he became a revert to the faith, he became acquainted with Chesterton in college, and that became something that drove his intellectual reversion as a young man. So things like that, coming across Chesterton directly like that, or why when Rocco, who had formed the Chesterton Academy of Akron in its early stages when it was basically a homeschool setup with 6 students, he came to me and asked if I'd like to be involved in some capacity. At that point, it was copywriting and editing the little things that they were putting out, and eventually invited me onto the board where I still sit. It was that encounter with Chesterton as kind of the good, the humorous, and the playful, but also as somebody who had that recognition of why evil things are evil and what they look like and kind of what they feel like to encounter. One of his articles about his own experiences, he wrote a story about how when he was in university, he came across a man who wasn't exactly a friend, but he was an acquaintance who he would carry on good conversation with because he was somebody of very high intelligence. And he called this person the diabolist, ultimately, because what he found out about this person as they conversed was that this was a person who not only didn't have a moral recognition of right and wrong in his life, but who was actively looking at life as a means to satisfy his desire for novelty of experience. And in his mind, the more out there you can get, the farther outside moral boundaries you can get, the more worthwhile an experience was to have. And that included wicked, evil things. And so in this fateful conversation that Chesterton had with this young man, where this became crystal clear finally, this guy revealed all of this to Chesterton and said, like, well, what do you think about that? And Chesterton gave an answer, something like, I think that in a real fighting democracy, we would burn devil worshippers like you at the stake. You know? And for somebody like Chesterton, who writes like him, who, it's not that he doesn't engage in fierce language. He does quite a lot. But he has playful language so often, and it's such a pleasure to read his turns of phrase, that when he says something piercing like that and heavy, it feels like your jolly good Santa Claus friend picked up an axe and swung it at something, and it's shocking because you know he really means it. Yeah. And that recognition of evil on its own terms and the honesty with which he engages in that, I think, is something that echoed into anybody who read Chesterton, Koontz included. And so Chesterton, at a distance, influenced my own reversion, I would say, because at the time that I was reading Koontz, I was not yet engaging with the faith very, I would say, courageously or intentionally. It was in my life, but not at the bone, not at the core, not at the center of my attention, not at all the compass that I needed at that time. But I was still reading books and watching movies that carried a ripple of people like Chesterton who were doing good work like that and who were indirectly influencing me to look at the world around me to think there is definitely evil. That means that good things really are good. And that's a shallow first impression of the moral context of reality, but that has an effect. To see somebody adult, intelligent, and deep thinking engage with evil seriously, and who isn't afraid to confront it as evil as such, is something that builds you up just to see it as an example.
Yes. I think another thing that's so important about him is, like you just said, kind of the inverse of the fact that he's able to confront evil so kind of profoundly, but also simply at the same time. And I mean simply in the sense that he just does it, right? Like, not simply in the fact that he handles it like in a simple manner, but he just does it, right? It's simple. It's a characteristic. He does the same thing with good. He finds good in all the simple things in life. One of the things that I really like him are his kind of like short little essays that he does, such as like finding God in the sidewalk, or finding God in like a tree, finding God in like a leaf, finding God in like a blade of grass. Like he is the embodiment of any opportunity is the best opportunity given the right, how does the phrase go? It's like any opportunity is the best opportunity given the right set of chances, right? You take something small and you make it into the grandest thing, kind of like a mustard seed, right?
Yeah, Dale Ahlquist, the head of the Chesterton Society, led all of us in a in a few days of a retreat, and not just a retreat, but also kind of a learning opportunity for board members, for headmasters, for people in the academy's various development departments. And at every turn in that conference, there was Eucharistic adoration, there was Mass, there was available confession. It was approaching the undergirding ideas of the Chesterton Schools Network as the project of a spiritual life. If you don't approach education in the Catholic context as something spiritual on some level, then even if you do a good job, you're really just an activist. And that's something so much shallower than somebody who's trying to expand, the spiritual realm of the people that you're teaching. And I look forward to Rocco telling you much more about what that looks like on the ground of the academy when he comes on eventually. But as somebody who is just adjacent to that part of the school's life, it's something that's incredibly encouraging. I think that it helped me understand that Chesterton, yeah, he's intelligent, yeah, he's a Catholic, and I have access to some of the things that he did and some of the things that he thought. But I think that he was a mystic. And if you read his writing with that notion in mind, you pay a slightly different amount of care to the phrases that he'll use, to the concepts that he'll hover on a little bit, because they'll seem a little bit out there to you sometimes. Sometimes when you read him, you must think, well, the reason I'm not focusing well on what he's saying is that he's wordier than me. But it's really that he's hovering on concepts that you're just not interested in yet, right?
Yeah. And that's something that, people nowadays really, really have a hard time with that. Funnily enough, I was in a Instagram comment section, really what you should not be doing on the internet. I had a weak moment, and I commented on this atheist video of Richard Dawkins and a guy named Alex O'Connor, who are two pretty well-known atheists on the internet. I follow the one guy just because he has some interesting takes. I don't follow Richard Dawkins. He has nothing really interesting to say. But they were talking about Jordan Peterson, and Richard Dawkins was basically just saying, when Jordan Peterson talks about religion, it's just word salad. He says a lot of big words, and people think that he's smart because they can't really understand what he's saying. It's just no, that's not really the case. We've kind of blindsided ourselves to an aspect that was always there, and we forgot how to read it. We forgot how to listen to it. We forgot how to go outside and feel wind on your face, right? Like when it's blowing in your face, you don't recognize what wind is anymore, what grass is, or any one of these things. And so when it hits you, you don't know what to think about it, and you become confused and disillusioned. You think it's something else, right? And that I just commented. I said, just because Richard Dawkins can't understand Jordan Peterson doesn't mean the rest of us don't. Mm-hmm. And that sparked a huge argument.
The proverbial hornet's nest was kicked.
Oh yeah. I had people, a lot of people message me.
Watch out and see what he says in the future, though, Dawkins, because he seemed. I don't know if you're familiar with Ayaan Hirsi Ali and her story. She was another one of the new atheists in the early 2000s. She was from Somalia, escaped to ultimately the Netherlands as a refugee, and built up a life for herself to where she became a member of Dutch Parliament. And she embraced. She came from an Islamist society, and she had an experience in her particular life context that was so devastating that she ricocheted all the way into really hard atheism. And she was initially very critical of even Christianity on the same basis, because she just couldn't bear the thought of she couldn't countenance giving the benefit of the doubt to any form of religion whatsoever.
Right.
But she very recently, I think within the last year or less, and only in the last few months publicly, decided to become a Christian. And she's a close enough friend with Richard Dawkins that it was within the last couple of weeks that he said, maybe I've given short shrift to Christianity in my life. Maybe I'm going to take a deeper look at why my friend Ayaan Hirsi Ali has made the decision that she's made. So
he's not wrong.
I mean, hey, listen, and the thing is, the new atheists were always interesting on a spectrum. My favorite was always Christopher Hitchens.
Oh yeah,
Christopher Hitchens,
He's funny.
he was hilarious, and it's hard to get away from that. And a lot of things he said were dreadful. God have mercy on his soul. But he had something to say that was human, that sparked conversation, that made you laugh, and you kind of wanted to see him in the ring with your favorite Christian thinker. And I always regret that he didn't ultimately have a public debate with people like Bishop Barron, or ultimately that he didn't live to see figures like Jordan Peterson come on the scene. It would have been good. It would have been good for everyone to see that exchange of ideas. Dawkins was always more boring. Dawkins didn't ever have a story that appealed to me. He was just the intellectual approach to the atheistic thing, and it was kind of a shallow approach. It was basically like, I think science is right, and you're like, okay, very, very deep thought.
Yeah.
That's kind of like that's kind of his whole book. But Ayaan Hirsi Ali had this interesting background where you're like, I disagree with her on religion, but I can see why this happened to you, ideologically speaking.
Yeah.
Hitchens had that kind of reaction to 9/11 and all the events around it.
Yes.
And Dawkins never felt like he had anything to say that interested me.
No. He's just an evolutionist.
Yeah.
Which
is
doesn't, in my mind, I don't think it really refutes anything that any of his opponents would have said. But you were going to say something.
Yeah, so there's a lot of great things here. And before we get too far away from philosophy and those like kind of deeper thought, someone like me who isn't well read or can't absorb philosophy as good as someone who's already been used to it, what are some steps that they should take to start to change their mind? Not change their mind, but form their mind so they can easier absorb philosophy and deeper thought.
Well, you studied these things, so you're gonna have something to say. But I'm gonna say, as a lay person who has to ask that question myself a lot, I think you could do much worse than just starting with grabbing 5 C.S. Lewis books off the shelf and start reading, because he engages Christianity from, I would say, the historical perspective, the philosophical perspective, the man on the street perspective. He wants you to understand Christianity as a life and as a way of viewing the world, and that is inherently philosophical, and he dips into familiar philosophy, or what should be familiar philosophy, quite a lot. So if you're somebody who wants to dip into that world but are a little bit put off by whether it's the wordiness of Chesterton or any of the other great thinkers, if somebody like Aquinas or Aristotle or Plato is somebody that you're not ready to engage with, I think that a big reason why Lewis is as big of a deal as he was and is that he approached those things in a manner that is digestible. And I think that it's why certain people see Peterson in the same way. I would say C.S. Lewis and Jordan Peterson and Bishop Robert Barron's content in certain respects. There's a lot of places in the Catholic world, in the intellectual world, that you can find approachable philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you can add something a little bit more exact than that.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say anything different than that. I think you're right. Those kind of like, I mean, C.S. Lewis is always good for anyone, and I think you hit the nail on the head of that. He's not beginner, right, thinker, but he's perfect for any type of reader. I would probably go even like a little bit further. I think, if you really want to get into philosophy, which, I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of philosophy is pretty bad, so it's really not even worth getting into. But, you have to look at the Enlightenment period, and there were 3 questions that were asked there. The Enlightenment period was terrible, but there were 3 questions that were really good, which were, who are we, where do we come from, and where are we going? And those 3 questions spark the simple why, right? Like the simple why. You have to go all the way back to the beginning, go to the caves, and you see a cave painting, a picture of people throwing spears at a mammoth. Why did they paint that, right? That simple thing. Like, why did they do that right at the beginning? To tell a story. Why were they trying to tell a story? For memory. For what purpose, right? Like, all these different things. Like, when you start, like, ask yourself, like, simple questions about, like, stories. Why did we write that? Why did we want to remember it? Those are the things that really make you want to seek the answers, right? you don't want to just, I feel like you don't really want to stuff yourself with the answers to start. Like, you can go to Mere Christianity, you can go to Descartes, you can go to Hume, you can go all these different people and stuff like that, but you won't understand any of it if you don't have a desire to search for it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to really start at the stories and go to, like, you know, even the Iliad or the Aeneid, any one of these stories, and because these are, you know, these are the building blocks of society, like these types of stories. So
Yeah, you could also there are pitfalls to approaching it this way, but you could look at classic Greek myths, familiarize yourself with the ones that are usually bound up in a volume at Barnes and Noble on any given day. Enjoy those for what they are, then read the New Testament, and then read Dante, for example, because you're kind of you're giving yourself a bit of a window into the classical education project just by doing that. You're looking at 3 different phases of human beings digesting truth in a certain form. The classical mythologies of, you know, Greece and Rome are obviously unsatisfactory to anybody who is trying to fully edify themselves and live a moral life, but they also communicate true things. And there's a reason that culture was so receptive to Christianity when it did come, because they were already onto the truth. They were already onto something. So when the truth did finally come, there was sufficient soil in that garden for the flower of truth to bloom. So taking it that way, as somebody who doesn't like and never has enjoyed approaching philosophy or history or politics purely from just the academic standpoint, I need stories. I need mythologies around them. I think that's one of the reasons why Christ used parables, for example. We need a story to compact the truth into something that makes sense to us, that we can digest in an easier form. So go to the myths, read them for what they are, read the Gospels, and then read the greatest work of poetry written by man in the Divine Comedy, and just take it from there.
and watch VeggieTales.
VeggieTales as well.
Yeah.
VeggieTales as well.
I miss VeggieTales so much. But yeah, that's I definitely want to do that because I have that, like you talk about, that desire. I not necessarily to know philosophy, but to expand my thought. And as I'm having these deeper conversations on a podcast, I want to make sure that I'm as sharp as I can be. I am able to add to a conversation in a smart manner and not just like, oh, I played baseball. That's cool. Like, you know what I mean? And no, there's so much in life. My goodness, books are crazy.
Well, I've got to wonder whether you're giving less than due credit to baseball as part of the grounding of your approach to the faith, for example, because baseball is something that, again, not a sports guy, but baseball is something that I have still been able to appreciate from that storyteller's or story recipient standpoint. If you, as somebody who isn't really a sports guy in the modern American context, goes to a baseball stadium and gets a hot dog and a beer and sits down in a seat with your friends and kind of just take in the atmosphere of that place, you don't need to pay strict attention to baseball all the time. The dramatic moments happen in spurts throughout the time that you're there. So you're kind of just basking in it for most of the time. And at some point the wave happens, or something similar to it. At some point there's cheering. At some point you get to see who's the big shot right now, the Japanese player. Ohtani. Okay, you get to see somebody like him exceed what you thought was possible for the human baseball player. So the thrills punctuate your experience here and there, but you're really just sitting in a space that captures Americana. And if I had grown up with an appreciation for that, I probably would have asked questions like, what are the rules to baseball? Who are the players?
Why is that guy throwing the ball?
Why does my dad want to come outside? Make me come outside all the time. Getting involved in just the aesthetic experience of baseball makes you feel a little bit better to be human. There's something incredibly beautiful about baseball. And I think that aesthetic experience is something that probably manifests itself in some form in your approach to the liturgical life or something like that. you can confirm or deny, but both of those things are. But you're observing both and interacting with both in a certain sense, right?
Yeah.
Is there a bridge there that makes sense?
There probably is that I just don't. I never looked at life. I just looked like, okay, I did this, I did this, I did this. I never looked at any deeper like thought into it. Like when I graduated high school, okay, cool. I didn't walk. I didn't even go to my graduation.
Mm-hmm.
College, same thing.
Yeah.
Because it just didn't mean anything to me. It was just like, it was just another.
It wasn't
just,
important.
Yeah, it's just checkbox. It is what it is. And so you're probably 100% correct. And I'm going to definitely, in my moments of silence during this 90, these are beautiful things that I can think about. And also the ability to go rewatch this podcast is going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
Quiet and contemplation.
There's so much to come back to. Yeah.
There's so many great things. And
do you want to know how to get into baseball? Sorry, not to cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good.
I was just going to say,
Please enlighten me.
you're into films, you have to watch Field of Dreams.
Okay, all right. Quick thing on Field of Dreams. quick. Okay,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to open the can of worms.
No, I know. We keep opening the words. Keep
I've
opening the words.
I've got to mention this. I've got to mention Field of Dreams. So Field of Dreams is I am familiar with it.
Yeah.
And only movie, as the story goes, that has ever made my dad cry.
Really?
Yeah. So my dad is very, Mr. 1946, that kind of vibe, and he is a very strong individual, very masterful at a lot of different things, and at a comfortable distance, shall we say, from that kind of vulnerability. But when he and my mother went to go see Field of Dreams in theaters, she said it was the only time that she watched a movie with him where he wept, because for anyone who doesn't know the ending of Field of Dreams, I won't spoil it, but I'll tell you that my dad, apparently, one of the things he did with my grandfather was every day that they would just go outside together and play catch. And Field of Dreams hit him very hard.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Ben. Yeah. Even that powerful elixir of film didn't quite do it for me, but
that's crazy.
It did make me appreciate it, and it did make me visit the Field of Dreams when I was in Iowa.
Oh, there you go. Okay. All right. Sorry.
No, there's no. I'm absorbing so much from this podcast. This is absolutely fantastic. Yeah. There's so many things to reflect on. 'Cause now I'm thinking about like sports, and I'm thinking about how like when I watch people compete, how I feel it. I love that energy. I thought when Corey's on the podcast, when you have like the added tension in that golf with Liv and the PGA Tour, and just not. I just need to start diving into the deep things. Actually thinking about what I'm watching, sports content, all these things, reading. I'm so excited to go back in real life.
It is all it is all available to you, my friend. All of it.
It is. Movies.
Godzilla -1.
Well, so there's one thing that there was a running joke for a little while that you didn't know the movie Cars. I apologize for bringing this up, but I wasn't in the in crowd when that all went down.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd love to hear how this happened.
Does it exist?
Listen, I know what's going on here. This is a long form conspiracy to get me to say something that I know isn't true, to respond to an accusation that is false. I know who you are. I know you're watching, and I'm not falling for this. Something that bothers me about Cars. This will tie us back to something we were talking about earlier in the beginning. So Pixar, golden age of Hollywood quality movies for the majority. I don't know if it's the majority of their time at this point, but from when we were little kids to, I don't know, high school, college, depending on where you were, Pixar was something that an adult, a film critic, a child, somebody off the street could watch and just be blown away by. Pixar is gold, or was. Pixar had a dream team. Every single thing they made was a home run for a long time. I remember when I saw a commercial for Cars on TV, and I thought to myself, I'm not going to see this one. There's just something about it. I don't know what it is. There's something with the character designs. There's something about the plot line. It was a step too far. It was too inhuman. Toys walking around at night while nobody's awake, I can handle. These things I could not stand.
Hours with eyes.
I won't get into it, but I was deceived by my friends. I was tricked. I was lured into a situation where I was told I was going to be watching the movie Airplane. And do you know what they turned on?
Cars.
The screen goes black, and then I hear this voice. I am speed.
Dun, 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 dun.
I tried to flee the apartment.
I just imagine them like grabbing you as you're like trying to get the door. They're like grabbing your arms back.
These
they
people-
tie you to the sofa.
These people who up until this point I would have trusted with my life deceived me, entrapped me, and got me in a situation that I could not escape.
So what'd you think of it?
What do I think of what?
Did they
Did you watch it?
Did you watch it? I don't know.
I saw something. I don't know what I saw. I saw some conglomeration of weird images and odd storylines and humanized vehicles. The Dynaco symbol is a dinosaur because they're fossil fuels, Mike.
Dude, I love the movie. It's beautiful. For my
Hey, don't let your kids watch Cars. There's a car with a tramp stamp, okay? We all know what you were doing, Pixar, and I'm calling you out. I don't know which member of your team was
Bro.
still...
Dude, there are so many jokes in that. There's another scene where he just finishes the race or something like that, and there's two cars flashing.
Yeah, they're flashing. Quality family content for you right
You know
there.
how long it took me to realize that?
I did not know for the longest time. Yeah, Brian does too.
Brian's gonna go home and watch it.
Apparently, supposedly there are other films in this series. One of which has is the Pope in the first one? The Pope-mobile?
No.
Oh no, this
The Pope-mobile in a Pope-mobile, which implies that the assassination attempt of the 80s actually happened in this world.
Yes.
So, what does that imply about this vehicle society?
It implies
honestly,
a lot.
there's probably a lot of philosophy and deep dive that we probably could go into it at some point.
There were humans at some point. Where did they go? Devoured by their humanized vehicles? Yeah,
Yeah, we're sure.
I know we're probably running close to this has been fantastic, but you do have a birthday coming up.
Yes.
Okay, I won't say the date because this is going to be seen by millions of people. But I did get you something. This is why I was late. I apologize for the pink. This is just what we had.
it's okay. Real men wear pink.
It is true. This is it's a big thing.
Salmon. We call it salmon. Though.
Yes. Rose.
Rose. Yeah. Rose, yeah.
If you'd go so far.
Okay, where should I position this as far as the unveiling?
Right there.
Yeah, right there. Is
How's that?
perfect. That's
Okay, sorry,
as long
man.
as you can reach.
Good.
Yeah, we're good.
Well, okay. Let me just. I'm really afraid right now, Mike.
there's nothing bad. I promise.
It's gonna be a car. I swear it's gonna be a
This
car.
thing-
Oh, it's better.
What I
bent it into an M for you.
Wait,
It's a nice long. It was a long stemmed rose.
an M-shaped rose.
There is more in there.
There is.
Oh yeah, there is more in there. And actually, God was working today because there's another fluffy thing in there,
Is it
and it
Christmas?
ties in perfectly to what we were talking about today.
Is this a dragon?
This is a dragon.
This is. Look at him, or her.
can we get that right up by the camera? Actually,
Yeah.
Can
This
we
is-
get a reach around to Brian?
Cinder the dragon. Take a look.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
When you started talking about Godzilla, I was like,
We brought up Godzilla. We brought up St. George and the Dragon. We brought up the myths of the Greco-Roman period, and here we are, Beanie Babies, bringing it home.
I was in the gas
Brian.
station staring at the Beanie Babies, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, okay, which one screams Michael Saltis? And I walked around the whole thing in my suit randomly on a Monday night, and I was drawn to that dragon. I do not know why, but now
I know why.
Now I do.
It called out to you because it knew where home really was with me.
With Michael Saltis, and you know what? This would be the wait. Before I just go end the podcast, I apologize. We are guests. We like to have them have an opportunity to leave something with our audience. Kind of like call to action, a last thought. It's a lot weighing on this.
Go see Godzilla -1.
Per Godzilla -1, it's not too late to reconcile with your friend. It's not too late to tell her that you love her. It's not too late to start a family. and it's not too late to correct a mistake, and it's not too late to do what you have to do to save your community, your family, and your country.
Beautiful.
Wow. And this is how we are ending podcast 26. Michael, thank you so much.
Hear, hear.
It's been real.